We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Listen, this is just breaking news, Emma, which relates to this story. We're just hearing that the BBC...
They're fucked now. They're fucked.
BBC?
60 Minutes did it with the Kamala Harris interview, but they did it the other way. They made it look like she had a good answer.
The BBC did this intentionally.
And this is the first hard evidence of the BBC and their lack of impartiality that we've always sensed in the background.
They think that the president's reputation was really damaged by that program.
U.S. President Donald Trump said he would likely sue the BBC next week for as much as $5 billion after the British broadcaster admitted it made a mistake in editing a video of a speech he gave.
I'm pleased that the chairman of the BBC, Dr. Samir Shah, has accepted where the institution has made mistakes.
That was so clearly fake news, and he rightfully dubbed that term many years ago, and this is a classic example of that. We see it in the United States all the time. We see it now in the United Kingdom. As you know, the president's external legal counsel has filed a lawsuit against the BBC. We expect that to continue.
For President Trump, the BBC's apology doesn't go far enough. And now he's told GB News he's going one step further.
So the BBC has apologised and retracted the report, but they say they won't pay any compensation.
Well, we'll sue them. We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was...
I think Trump is playing politics. And of course, he has a right to be aggrieved by the way the BBC edited the Panorama programme.
Donald Trump is gearing up for a massive legal battle with the BBC, seeking billions in damages after the broadcaster admitted to mishandling.
Litigation is always a commercial decision and it's a reputational decision. So the BBC will have to look at the cost involved in doing that, and it would be a very long and very costly exercise.
I think I have an obligation to do it. Look, I'm not looking to get into lawsuits, but I think I have an obligation to do it. This was so egregious. If you don't do it, you don't stop it from happening again.
The BBC is in complete meltdown right now. 2 top executives just resigned, the Director General is gone, and Donald Trump is demanding $5 billion from Britain's national broadcaster. Yeah, you heard that right. $5 billion with a B. This isn't some random Twitter beef, folks. This is about the BBC getting caught red-handed editing Trump's January 6th speech to make him look like he was calling for violence when he actually said the opposite. They literally changed the words coming out of his mouth, and now Trump's lawyers are circling like sharks. The BBC apologized, but Trump's not having it. He says this goes beyond fake news. This is corruption. And honestly, after seeing what they did, it's hard to argue with him. The editing scandal that started it all. Here's exactly what the BBC did, and it's worse than you think. Back in 2024, right before the election, they aired this Panorama documentary called Trump, A Second Chance. The whole thing was supposed to analyze Trump's political comeback, but they decided to get creative with his January 6th speech. They took 3 separate quotes from 2 completely different parts of his speech. We're talking an hour apart, and spliced them together to make it look like one continuous statement. So in the BBC version, Trump appears to say, "We're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell." Sounds pretty incendiary, right? Like he's telling people to march to the Capitol and fight. That's exactly what the BBC wanted viewers to think. But here's what Trump actually said that day. First, he told the crowd, "We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women." Then he said, "I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building, to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Peacefully and patriotically, they cut that part right out. The fight like hell part? That came almost an hour later in a completely different context. Trump said, "We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." He wasn't talking about the Capitol March at all. The BBC basically took a speech where Trump explicitly called for peaceful protest and turned it into what looked like a call for violence. They didn't just edit for time, they completely changed the meaning. It's like taking someone saying, "I love pizza but hate anchovies," and editing it to, "I hate pizza." Same person, same voice, totally different message. This documentary aired just days before the 2024 election, reaching millions of viewers across the BBC's platforms. Think about the timing here. People are making up their minds about who to vote for, and the BBC is showing them a version of Trump that literally didn't exist. The crazy part is how they got caught. It wasn't some whistleblower or internal investigation. The Daily Telegraph in the UK did the detective work, comparing the BBC's edit to the actual speech transcript. When they published their findings, it was like watching dominoes fall. First came the complaints, over 500 of them once people realized what happened. Then, the resignations started. BBC Chairman Samir Shah had to write a letter to Parliament admitting they gave the impression of a direct call for violent action, when that wasn't what Trump said at all. Director General Tim Davie resigned, saying he had to take ultimate responsibility for the mistakes. News Chief Deborah Turness quit too, saying the controversy was damaging the BBC. But here's what really gets me. This wasn't some rookie mistake by an intern. This was the BBC's flagship current affairs program, Panorama. These are supposed to be the professionals, the gold standard of British journalism. And they pulled an editing trick so blatant that even their own board members couldn't defend it. Trump's reaction was exactly what you'd expect. He called it corrupt and said it was worse than what CBS did to Kamala Harris during the 60 Minutes interview. His lawyers are now demanding not just an apology, but compensation for what they're calling overwhelming reputational and financial harm. The fallout and legal threat. Now here's where things get really interesting. Trump isn't just angry, he's going nuclear with the legal threats. His Florida-based attorney Alejandro Brito sent the BBC a formal demand letter that reads like a declaration of war. They want a full retraction of the documentary, a public apology, and here's the kicker, appropriate compensation for what they're calling defamation. The letter gave the BBC until 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday to comply, or face a lawsuit for no less than $1 billion. But Trump being Trump, he couldn't help but up the ante when reporters asked him about it on Air Force One. "We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week," he said. $5 billion. That's more than some countries' entire GDP. Think about what that number represents. The BBC's entire annual budget is around $6 billion. Trump is essentially demanding most of their yearly revenue as damages. It's either the most audacious legal bluff in history, or Trump genuinely believes this edit caused him billions in reputational damage. Legal experts are split on whether Trump has a real case. In the UK, there's a 1-year deadline for defamation suits, and that window is already closed since the documentary aired in 2024. But Trump's lawyers cited Florida law in their demand letter, suggesting they might file in the US where the rules are different. American courts have been more willing to hear cases involving foreign media companies, especially when the content reaches American audiences. The BBC's response has been fascinating to watch. They sent Trump a personal apology letter on Thursday, with Chairman Samir Shah calling the edit an error of judgment. But they also made it crystal clear they won't be writing any checks. The broadcaster said it had no plans to rebroadcast the documentary, and rejected the defamation claim outright. Here's the political angle that makes this even messier. The BBC is funded by British taxpayers through a mandatory license fee of about $230 per household. Conservative politicians are already asking whether public money could end up paying Trump's damages if he wins. Former Media Minister John Whittingdale said there would be real anger if license payers had to foot the bill for the BBC's mistakes. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is walking a tightrope here. He can't throw the BBC under the bus because it's a national institution, but he also can't ignore Trump's legitimate grievances. When asked directly whether he'd urge Trump to drop the lawsuit, Starmer dodged the question completely. He just said he believes in a strong and independent BBC, but they need to get their house in order. The timing couldn't be worse for the BBC. They're already facing a once-a-decade charter review in 2027, where the government decides their funding and governance structure. Critics have been arguing for years that the license fee is outdated in the streaming age, and this scandal just hands them more ammunition. What's really damaging is how this fits into a pattern. The BBC has been accused of bias from all sides. Conservatives say they're too left-wing. Progressives say they're too establishment. They've faced criticism over their Gaza coverage, transgender issues, and now this Trump edit. Each controversy chips away at their credibility. Trump knows exactly what he's doing here. He's not just seeking damages. He's making an example of the BBC to send a message to media organizations worldwide. His press secretary, Caroline Levitt, called the BBC a leftist propaganda machine and said Trump views this as election interference. The BBC is trying to contain the damage, launching an investigation into whether similar editing problems exist in other programs. They've already found another questionable edit of Trump's speech on their Newsnight program. It's like pulling on a thread and watching the whole sweater unravel. Global media implications. This BBC scandal isn't happening in a vacuum, folks. Media organizations around the world are watching this case very carefully because it could reshape how they handle political coverage. If Trump wins a massive judgment against the BBC, it sets a precedent that could make editors think twice before getting creative with their cuts. We're already seeing the ripple effects. Turns out, the BBC wasn't the only broadcaster that edited Trump's January 6th speech. Swedish broadcaster SVT and Australia's ABC also made similar cuts, removing the peacefully and patriotically language while keeping the more inflammatory parts. Now they're probably all lawyering up, wondering if they're next on Trump's hit list. The implications for Canadian media are huge here. The CBC faces similar accusations of bias from conservative politicians, and they're funded by taxpayers just like the BBC. If Trump successfully argues that misleading edits constitute election interference, it could open the door for politicians everywhere to challenge how their speeches get presented. Think about the chilling effect this could have on journalism. Editors make hundreds of decisions every day about what to include and what to cut. Most of the time, it's innocent. You're trying to fit a 2-hour speech into a 3-minute segment. But this case shows how those editorial choices can completely change the meaning of what someone said. The legal precedent is what really matters here. If American courts rule that foreign media companies can be held liable for how they edit political content, it fundamentally changes the game. Media lawyers are probably rewriting their guidelines right now, telling editors to be extra careful when dealing with controversial political figures. International media law experts are calling this a potential watershed moment. The traditional defense has always been editorial discretion. Journalists have the right to decide what's newsworthy and how to present it. But when that discretion crosses the line into misrepresentation, where do you draw the boundaries? Conclusion. The BBC gambled with their credibility and lost spectacularly. Whether Trump gets his $5 billion or not, the damage to one of the world's most respected news organizations is already done. This case will be studied in journalism schools for decades as an example of how editorial bias can destroy institutional trust. What do you think? Is Trump right to demand billions? Or is this just political theater? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit subscribe for more media accountability coverage.